Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We have another educational session with us. Today, we have an interesting topic. Many non-Muslim and many Muslims sometimes get confused when they hear this topic. The topic called Nation of Islam. Sometimes, those individuals who are immigrant to the United States, they even get confused. What is Nation of Islam? So in order to explore more into the topic, we have invited an expert into that subject. We have an educator with us and also a chaplain. Chaplain Mushin Shaheed, he's an influential person in DFW Metroplex. I would let him introduce himself. So chaplain, please go ahead, introduce yourself to our audience.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Muhsin Shaheed, and the topic that I'm going to be discussing today is Islam in America. And I have the privilege to have experience with Islam in America. I was one of Elijah Muhammad's secretaries in Fort Worth, and the secretary was called the laborer, which means that the organization of the management of the local mosque was virtually under the hierarchy of a minister, the secretary, and the captain. So I have experience in this area, and also I had the pleasure to make the transition from Elijah Muhammad to his son, Imam Wartadi Muhammad. So today I would like to share my perspective as an insider on so many topics of discussion regarding the Nation of Islam in America. Currently, I am a chaplain at DFW Airport for the last 22 years. And also I'm an educator in Fort Worth. My academic background is from TCU community, my undergraduate and my master's, and I completed a master's in Islamic studies in Washington, DC as well. And I had the privilege to travel throughout the Muslim world and Africa and other parts of Europe. So I have experience as well as education in this topic matter. And I'm also involved with the academic institution of that's called the Institute of Medieval Post-Medieval Studies. And I work very closely with the interfaith community, and we could go on and on and on, but I want to save time to share on some questions that may be on individual minds, and I can bring a little clarity to those questions, hopefully.
Okay, all right, great, thank you. We are lucky to have an insider with us who would be able to provide true information. So that leads to our first question. When and who introduced Islam to African Americans?
Well, first of all, Islam went through a series of phases. I want to briefly mention Marcus Garvey and Noble Drew Ali. They were forerunners to Elijah Muhammad and his leadership. But however, of the three, Elijah Muhammad, under the leadership of Farad Muhammad, had the greatest impact on African Americans in America in terms of accepting Islam. Even though Farad Muhammad did not bring what is considered to be Sunni Islam, and we call it Islam proper, he laid the foundation with Elijah Muhammad. In 1930, Farad Muhammad came to this country as a silk peddler, and he encountered Elijah Muhammad, which came from a long line of Baptist ministers. His family had migrated from Sanderville, Georgia to Detroit. And it's important to understand that from 1930, slavery had only been virtually over with for roughly 65 years. So it's important to understand that the Nation of Islam under Farad Muhammad brought a form of what we call reverse psychology. And that was, instead of the angels, the disciples, and all of the seers in the image of European, he reversed it and brought it into blackness. So instead of black being negatively looked at, Farad Muhammad reversed the psychology and made black superior. So actually the Nation of Islam was not Islam, it was a social movement. It was social reformation. And lots of people think that Elijah Muhammad taught Islam. He did not. He only used words that was taught by his teacher, which was Farad Muhammad. And Farad came from the area of Pakistan. Pakistan had not been partitioned at that time, but he was a Muslim himself. And he brought this idea to Elijah Muhammad. So this movement elevated the dignity and the self-esteem of African Americans, because everything that was black, including the African American himself, first and foremost, he brought a sense of dignity to it, where they looked up on themselves as superior, where before they were seen as negative, and everything about black was contradictory to the dignity of the individual. So the Nation of Islam, this reverse psychology, gave a sense of elevation, because it's important to realize that many of the people that he came to were directly related as slaves, or they were the first descendant of slaves themselves. So we're talking about people that were not able to read, write, and had been virtually slaves for roughly over 400 years, denied every aspect of dignity and freedom. These are the kind of people that the Nation of Islam, under the old movement of Farad Muhammad and Elijah Muhammad, initially appealed to. So this idea was basically a form of social reformation, to give human dignity and to move people forward. However, it was the foundation for Islam to come. And I get into that a little later in some of the other questions. Yeah. But
All right. That is excellent introduction to know the beginning initiation of this movement from that early. And thank you very much for introducing Farad Muhammad and Elijah Muhammad. But the next question I have is, even though from your introduction, it seems like the authentic Islam wasn't the message that came to African Americans at that time, why did they call it Islam, or why did they took the word Islam into the naming of this movement?
the strategy that Farad wanted, he wanted Islam to be the end product. During the Nation of Islam, the Muslim was told to place the Quran at the highest level in their home, above every book, virtually to build a shelf and put the Quran at the highest point, because that would be the ultimate goal. Farad told Elijah, at the time, he wrote the name WD on the back of a door, and he told Elijah that his son, and how did he know his son would be born? We don't have a clue. However, he told his son that would help him in his work and his building the nation. He wanted Islam to be the end results. However, before the end result will come, in order for it to be effective, you have to understand, again, the condition of the African Americans. It was essential for them to know why they had went through what they had gone through, and that is slavery. Because that was on all of their minds. Why were, for 400 years, nowhere in the history of man, no people had ever experienced the kind of slavery that African American experienced in America. The Encyclopedia Britannica states that there was no slavery like the American slavery. They was reduced as child slavery, cattle virtually, below them. And so Islam was not necessarily important at that time. Elijah Muhammad said that Farad Muhammad mentioned many times, his job was simply to pull us out of the fire of inferiority, the fire of self-hatred. This was important for the human dignity to surface and to come to a point where then Islam proper would simply be accepted with open arms. And he told him that his son would be the one to carry the ball forward. And so Elijah, they began to groom Wallace Muhammad as the one that would lead the task to go forward. He sent him throughout the Middle East to learn Islam, and he also brought in Arabic-speaking peoples in his home when what he had was in diametrically opposed to proper Islam. Because as you know, the greatest thing that is opposite of Islam is shirk, when you have another God other than Allah. And in the old days, Farad was seen as Allah in the person, and Elijah Muhammad was seen as his messenger. That is the total opposite of what Islam proper is. Yet and still, Elijah wanted his son to be educated because this is what his teacher wanted him to do, so that Islam proper would come at a certain point in time, and it did.
Thank you. Thank you. Did Farad Muhammad, did he claim himself to be a true believer of Islam proper, or like Sunni Islam, or did he practice Islam in a proper way that a Sunni Muslim would do so?
It was told by Elijah Muhammad's wife, and he also by Imam Warthabi Muhammad, that Farad Muhammad never claimed to be God. This was the concept that the people saw him in. No words is written and none of the material that Farad ever claimed to be God. However, this is the idea that the individual, the people saw him. Because you have to keep in mind, that was not such an alien idea, because it was reverse psychology. And the mere fact that in the Christian religion, African American was already seeing a man, Jesus, as God. They saw him as God, as God's son, and God coming down into him. So that was not such an alien idea when you look in the community of African Americans to see an individual as God or even as the messenger of God, because this was the way that they were already perceiving their understanding of Christianity. And it just reverse psychology.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. And then another question I have, some of the terms like you have mentioned earlier, like temples, laborers, fruit of Islam, MGD or Muslim girls training. What are these terms or concepts? Were these created by Nation of Islam?
Yes, they were. This was given by Farad, and Farad was, the idea itself was virtually Farad, and Farad virtually helped set up 3 of the temples. The first one in Detroit, the second in Chicago, and the third in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And Elijah was the builder of the Nation of Islam. However, those concepts alone show you that it was not Islam. The temple was a concept to give some sense of autonomy and also independence from Islam itself. However, it was a movement used as the house of worship and also a place of training. It was called the temple. And in the temple, each temple, there was laborers. Laborers mean that the one that do the work, there was virtually 3 in every temple. There was a minister, job primarily was to be the head individual in the temple, but his job was mostly is to deliver the message. And then you had the captain. The captain job was simply over the FOI, which stands for the Fruit of Islam, was the what I call the military arm of the movement that kept the temple protected inside as well as outside. And the secretary job was simply to record the facts over the financial aspect of the temple and also how the temple operated from day to day. Those three officials, and then you had the standard Fruit of Islam, and the Fruit of Islam had lieutenants, men and women, to assist the captain, which was men's captain as well as women captain. And on the women's side, it was called MGT, it was called Muslim Girls Training. If you notice, not Muslim women's training, it was Muslim girls training. And Elijah Muhammad had the temple members fasting only during the month of December. Because December in America, as you well know, the days are very short. So he said that we were being conditioned over the years to get used to fasting. Everything that was about the Nation of Islam was kind of like an introductory to Islam proper. But it only came during Elijah time. I think it's important for me to mention this as well, is that Imam Wartadi Muhammad was excommunicated on at least 3 occasions. He was excommunicated because when he understood Islam proper, he came back to the temple and he was recorded and he was brought up to his father that was teaching just the opposite of what he wanted to bring in. So it's important to know also that at the death of Elijah, his son, Imam Wartadi Muhammad, became the leader, as it was also planned at the death of Elijah, but not during the time of Elijah. And Imam Wartadi Muhammad, he has been given credit to have the largest conversion of people on North American continent when he became a leader of the Nation of Islam and made the full transition, he said, by introducing the Quran to the African American community.
Oh, excellent. Thank you very much for sharing that. Did Imam Warti Muhammad, he had training from an recognized, like a school in Saudi Arabia or Middle East or India, Pakistan area?
Yes, he traveled the world. And also his father brought teachers to America as well. So to show you the strategy of his father, knowing what he had and what he was teaching was not Islam proper, but yet and still, he made sure that his son understood Islam because he knew his son would succeed him. So many people think that Elijah Muhammad taught Islam. He simply did not teach Islam. He was a social reformer. He taught social reformation. I think it's very important to understand that Islam proper came with the Nation of Islam when Imam Wartadi Muhammad, the son of Elijah Muhammad, succeeded him at his death. And then from there, he brought in Islam proper.
All right, thank you. Excellent information. All right, then there are 2 other names also ring bell to some of the audience: Wallace D. Muhammad and Malcolm X. Who are those individuals?
Actually, Wallace D. Muhammad is Imam D. Muhammad. He was excommunicated before and also during the time of Malcolm. And as you know, Malcolm accepted Islam in the prison. He became one of Elijah's very accomplished students. And the rift between Malcolm and Elijah occurred basically at the death of John F. Kennedy. Elijah, being a wise man, didn't want any negative comments made about President John F. Kennedy. And he issued a command throughout his community, the Nation of Islam, that there should be no negativity talked about President Kennedy. And Malcolm could not resist the opportunity when he was approached by the media. He made a rather negative statement about chicken coming home to roost, which means that was unsympathetic during a crisis that we was experiencing at that time in this country. And once it got back to Elijah, he set Malcolm down for 90 days. And Malcolm could not resist the sit down for 90 days. he continued to go forward, define his leader, and the rest is history. The Malcolm tried on numerous times to reach Elijah to make an apology, but there was many individuals, as you well know, there was every known African-American organization had record with infiltration had happened with the authorities, FBI, and other officers throughout the country. And that situation kind of, the rift divided further and further between Elijah and Muhammad to keep the two from coming back together. And finally, Malcolm was assassinated, and Elijah, the record from his family is that he cried because he saw Malcolm as a son. However, there is different opinions about that, but what's important is to know that Malcolm played a major role in terms of exposing Islam, the Nation of Islam, throughout the country. He was very charismatic and very articulate, and he made a great contribution in terms of able to get the message of Elijah out in the Nation of Islam that exposed this to so many other people, and the temple and the community grew greatly under Malcolm's leadership as the representative for Elijah Muhammad.
Thank you. So do we still call the worship place of Nation of Islam as temples, or I have seen some of the organizations name, they have been converted to mosque, or, I think some other names. What are the general names nowadays?
Well, okay, it's important to make a distinction between the Nation of Islam now and the Nation of Islam under Elijah Muhammad community. Elijah's complete community came up under the control of the individual that we called earlier, Wallace D. Muhammad, became Imam Warthi D. Muhammad. So Imam Warthi D. Muhammad, he inherited the whole complete Nation of Islam, and Minister Farrakhan was included in that leadership at that time. However, Minister Farrakhan was in the Nation of Islam, and at the time of Elijah's death, the leadership, as I indicated, it was widely accepted that Imam Warthi Muhammad, which was the plan of Farad Muhammad as well as Elijah Muhammad, became the leader. And Farrakhan came and stayed within the community for about 2.5 years. Elijah Muhammad passed in 1975. Imam Muhammad inherited the Nation of Islam, and he began to make a series of changes, bringing it to proper Islam. Minister Farrakhan stayed for about 2.5 years. And then afterward, he departed and resurrected what would be appropriately called the Nation of Islam #2, because he began and resurrected the old Nation of Islam again. So what you have now is the Nation of Islam under Minister Farrakhan, which, as I indicated, could easily be called, or properly be called, the Nation of Islam #2. So, however, the community of Imam Warthi Muhammad, it evolved through a series of changes, and at the end of his death, it was called mosque cares. And those masajids around the country, what we call Islam proper, that's not part of the Nation of Islam. So you have the Nation of Islam under Minister Louis Farrakhan leadership, and you have each masajid in many different cities across the country called masajids, and with different individuals named after individuals. The vast majority of them are named Masjid Muhammad, but these are totally Islam proper houses of worship, distinctly, totally from the temples that Minister Farrakhan community is still labeled as.
Oh, great. Great to know that. Yep. So I think we are almost at the end of our time. The last question I have is, what is the status of African American Muslims in relation to general community in other words, Sunni Muslims? What is the status today?
Today, African Americans see themselves as independent thinkers, free thinkers. Imam Muhammad's goal and mission that he accomplished was to lay the foundation of Islam proper for African Americans, in particular those members that was in his association. So African Americans are very pragmatic, and you will find them in masajids all across the country. You will find them in predominant African American communities as well as immigrant communities. And the whole idea was to create independent thinkers, to accept Islam proper, and to be part and parcel of the total universal ummah of the Muslim community.
And for example, if somebody non-Muslim wants to embrace Islam and they go to a Nation of Islam individual, do you think that non-Muslim would be embracing to proper Islam, or they need to do a little bit more research before they embrace Islam through a Nation of Islam individual?
Well, again, I would have to make a distinction again. The Nation of Islam, again, is only identified as that affiliation directly with Minister Louis Farrakhan. So if anyone wants to come to any of the hundreds of masajids of African Americans, primarily community around the country, and many of them do, it's growing exponentially. You will find lots of people embracing Islam proper. And so, yes, if they go to the masajid, of course, because they will take the Shahada. And I have to say also, Minister Farrakhan has began also to study the Arabic, his community is, and also they'll begin to move out in the community, embracing Islam, what we call Islam proper. But the title, the Nation of Islam, is still attributed to them. So if someone wants to embrace Islam, yes, there's so many houses of worship, particularly those places that was under the auspices, if you will, of the leadership of Imam Muhammad. Yes, by all means, they would embrace Islam proper.
Okay, excellent. And in today, 21st century, today, do general Muslim population, Muslim, Islam proper, do they need to worry any worship place they go to pray? Do they need to worry? I mean, do they need to think about it? Who are we, following in terms of when we go join a Jama'ah? Do they need to ask any questions and watch out if the original Nation of Islam ideology still exists in some of those temples or masajid of Muhammad, the naming?
Well, I don't think there should be any worry, because Islam, basically, when one believes in Allah and he knows that there's only one prophet, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However, when it comes down to what we call the school of thought, which is the madhab, Imam Muhammad was given a title once we call creation supported social logic. Simply means that Islam is a very sensible, reasonable, practical, logical way of life. And I'm here to say as a witness that the vast majority of all the Muslims I encounter, they have that madhab. As you know, Muslim, throughout the Muslim world, they consider what is called schools of thought. But it's important to realize that there were many, many more schools of thought. Not only four. Those four simply adhered in the Muslim community because of the students of the leaders. And so this is not necessarily incumbent upon people to identify one or two or three or four of those schools of thought only, because Islam is Quranic based and the life, for example, of our Prophet Muhammad. That's the most important thing to understand about Islam. So when one wants to embrace Islam, I don't think there should be any fear, and I haven't seen any, and I'm not aware of any, of the individual when they come to the masajids, particularly those predominant masajids in the African American community. They going to understand Islam and get a very, very good understanding of the founding of Islam, not only in America, but throughout the Muslim world. But most of all, there will be, the individual will become a practical, reasonable, logical citizen. And therefore, that individual is able to move forward in America and the world.
Thank you, Chaplain Mushin Shaheed. Looks like we are at the end of our time, and I really appreciate you taking time and share your knowledge with our audience. May God Almighty bless you and continue to give you the ability so you continue to serve the Muslim community and as a chaplain entire DFW community. Thank you very much.
Thank you.